The auditorium buzzed with excitement as families filled every seat, cameras flashing and voices calling out congratulations. Marissa Johnson smoothed her black graduation gown and adjusted her cap, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Her phone showed 2:30 p.m. The ceremony would start in 30 minutes. Still no sign of them. She pulled out her phone again, scrolling through the same empty message thread she'd been checking all morning. The last text was from yesterday. "Can't wait to see you graduate tomorrow. So proud of you. Robert," followed by heart emojis from her 16-year-old twin daughters Sierra and Amber. A woman next to her squealed as her family waved from the third row. "There's my mom. And my sister flew in from Texas," she gushed to Marissa. "Where's your family sitting?" Marissa forced a smile. "They're running a bit late." But deep down, a cold knot was forming in her stomach. Robert was never late to anything important. The girls might oversleep, but they'd been talking about this day for weeks. Even her sister Delilah had promised to come, despite their complicated relationship. At 38 years old, Marissa was finally finishing her bachelor's degree in social work. It had taken her 15 years of night classes, online courses, and summer sessions while raising her daughters and supporting her husband's business ventures. She'd studied while cooking dinner, written papers during lunch breaks at her job as a medical receptionist, and taken exams after everyone else was asleep. This was supposed to be her day. The ceremony began, and Marissa's heart sank deeper with each passing minute. She watched other graduates hug their families before taking their seats, listened to proud parents cheer during the processional, and felt more alone than ever. Her phone buzzed. A text from her neighbor Mrs. Patterson. "Saw the family loading up the car with food earlier. Big party today?" "Party?" Marissa frowned and quickly typed back. "What do you mean?" Robert had the truck packed with chairs and coolers. The girls were carrying decorations. Looked like quite the celebration. The ceremony continued around her, but Marissa barely heard the speeches. Her mind raced as she pieced together what was happening. The food, the decorations, the chairs. Another buzz. This time, a notification from Instagram. Delilah had posted a new story. Marissa's blood turned to ice as she watched the video. Her sister stood in her backyard, arms spread wide, grinning at the camera. "Welcome to Delilah's graduation barbecue," she announced. "Thanks to everyone who came to celebrate my sister's big day with us." The camera panned across the crowd and there they were. Robert manning the grill, wearing the world's best husband apron Marissa had bought him last Father's Day. Sierra and Amber running around with their cousins, laughing and carefree. Her mother-in-law sitting at a picnic table, holding court with the other relatives. All of them. Every single person who should have been in this auditorium, cheering for her, was at her sister's house instead. Marissa Johnson. Her name echoed through the speakers. She stood on shaking legs and walked across the stage. The photographer smiled and gestured for her to look at the camera, but all she could see were the empty seats where her family should have been. The dean shook her hand and handed her the diploma she'd worked so hard to earn. No one cheered. No one called her name. The applause was polite but distant, meant for all the graduates collectively, not for her specifically. She returned to her seat, clutching the leather folder containing her degree. Around her, families were already making plans for dinner, for celebration parties, for taking pictures. Marissa sat in silence, staring at her phone. 3 more Instagram stories had appeared from the party. Her husband laughing with Delilah's friends. Her daughters playing volleyball. Her own mother, who lived just 20 minutes away, chatting with neighbors over plates of barbecue. The ceremony ended and graduates began finding their families. Marissa remained seated, watching the auditorium slowly empty. A few people glanced at her with pity, probably wondering why she looked so devastated on what should be the happiest day of her life. Her phone rang. Robert's name appeared on the screen. She stared at it until it went to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. By the time she finally stood up to leave, the missed call count had reached 15. Her voicemail inbox was full. Text messages were flooding in, all from Robert, all with the same frantic energy. "Where are you? Call me back now. This is an emergency. Marissa, please answer your phone. We need to talk urgently." She walked slowly through the empty auditorium, past the scattered programs and forgotten water bottles. In the parking lot, she could hear other families making dinner reservations and planning celebration drinks. Her car sat alone in the far corner where she'd parked early that morning, full of hope and excitement. She got in and sat in the silence, her graduation cap sliding off her head onto the passenger seat. Her phone buzzed with another call from Robert. This time she answered. "Marissa, thank God. Where have you been? I've been calling you for hours. I've been at my graduation, she said quietly. You know, the thing you promised you'd be at. Silence on the other end. Oh my God. Marissa, I can explain. Delilah called this morning and said she was throwing you a surprise party and… Stop. Marissa's voice was steady, but something fundamental had shifted inside her. Just stop talking. But you don't understand. She said she'd already talked to you about it. She said you wanted everyone to come here instead of the ceremony. She said. She lied. The words came out flat and final. And you believed her. All of you believed her instead of asking me directly. We can fix this. Come to the house. Everyone's here waiting for you. We can celebrate now. Marissa looked at her diploma in its folder. 15 years of sacrifice. 15 years of putting everyone else first. 15 years of being invisible in her own life. No, she said. I won't be coming to the party. She ended the call and turned off her phone. As she drove home, she passed Delilah's street. She could see the cars lined up outside her sister's house, hear the laughter and music carrying on the evening air. They were all there. Her husband, her children, her sister, her mother, her in-laws, her friends, all celebrating her achievement without her. For the first time in her adult life, Marissa was completely alone on what should have been one of her most important days. But as she pulled into her empty driveway, she realized something that would change everything. She was done being invisible. When Robert's truck pulled into the driveway at 11 that night, Marissa was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a stack of papers beside her. She turned her phone back on an hour ago to find 53 missed calls and countless text messages. The front door slammed and Robert rushed into the kitchen, still wearing that ridiculous apron. His face was flushed and she could smell beer on his breath. Marissa, there you are. We looked everywhere for you. Why didn't you come to Delilah's? Everyone was asking about you. She didn't look up from her laptop screen. Were they? How interesting. Look, I know you're upset, but let me explain what happened. Robert pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. Delilah called me this morning around 8. She was crying, saying she'd made a huge mistake with the party planning. She said she'd told you last week that she wanted to throw you a celebration at her place instead of going to the ceremony, and that you'd agreed. Marissa finally looked at him. And you believed that? Well, yeah. She was so upset. She said she'd already bought all the food and decorations, and that you'd specifically requested a family barbecue instead of sitting through a long ceremony. She said you hated being the center of attention. When, Marissa said slowly, in the 15 years you've known me, have I ever hated being the center of attention for something I worked hard for? Robert opened his mouth, then closed it. When have I ever missed one of the girls' school plays, science fairs, or soccer games? When have I ever skipped your company parties or awards dinners? When have I ever not shown up for something that mattered? Never, he admitted quietly. But you thought I'd skip my own graduation. After 15 years of night school, weekend classes, and studying while you watched TV. You thought I'd want to miss the moment I walked across that stage and got my diploma. Robert rubbed his face with his hands. When you put it like that, it sounds crazy. But Delilah was so convincing. She showed me text messages that looked like they were from you. What text messages? Screenshots of conversations where you supposedly said you didn't want a big fuss, that you'd rather have a quiet family celebration. Robert pulled out his phone. She deleted them from the group chat, said she was embarrassed about pressuring you. Marissa stared at him. You do realize she could fake those in about 30 seconds, right? The color drained from Robert's face. You think she made them up? I think my sister has been jealous of me getting attention for something that had nothing to do with her. I think she couldn't stand the idea of one day being about me instead of her. Marissa turned her laptop screen toward him. But it doesn't matter now. On the screen was a confirmation email from her bank. Transfer complete. $47,000 moved from joint checking to personal savings. Robert's eyes widened. What is this? That's my money. The inheritance from Grandma Rose that I put in our joint account 3 years ago. The money I used to pay for Delilah's business startup because she promised she'd pay me back. Marissa scrolled to another email. This is from my lawyer. Our divorce papers were filed at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Divorce? Robert shot to his feet. Marissa, you can't be serious. We can work this out. So we missed your graduation. It was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Marissa's voice remained calm. It was a pattern. Sit down, Robert. He reluctantly took his seat, looking like a man who just realized he was in quicksand. Do you remember our anniversary last year? Marissa asked. Of course. We went to that new restaurant downtown. No. You forgot our anniversary. I made reservations, got a babysitter, bought a new dress. At the last minute, you said your brother needed help moving and it couldn't wait. We never rescheduled. Robert shifted uncomfortably. That's different. Is it? What about my birthday 2 years ago? We celebrated your birthday 3 weeks late because Sierra had a soccer tournament that weekend, and then Amber had a school project due, and then your mother was visiting. Marissa pulled out a notebook. I started keeping track after that. Do you want to know how many times in the last 5 years my plans were changed or canceled for someone else's needs? She flipped through pages covered in her neat handwriting. 27 times. 27 times I scheduled something for myself, and 27 times it was moved aside for the girls' activities, your work events, or family emergencies that somehow always involved helping other people. Robert looked at the notebook like it was evidence in a murder trial. You wrote all this down? I started to think I was going crazy. That maybe I was being selfish for wanting attention occasionally. So I kept track. Marissa turned to another page. This is how much money I've given to your family over the years. Your brother's car payment when he was between jobs for 8 months. Your sister's wedding expenses. Your mother's medical bills that her insurance should have covered. The numbers added up to over $30,000. This page is how much I gave to my family. Delilah's business startup. Delilah's rent when she couldn't make it after her breakup. Delilah's car down payment. Another $15,000. And this is how much anyone has paid back. The page was blank. Robert stared at the evidence of his wife's invisible life. I didn't realize. Of course you didn't. Because I handled everything quietly. I never complained when I had to work overtime to cover the money I gave away. I never said anything when I ate lunch at my desk for 6 months to save money for Sierra's volleyball camp. I just did what needed to be done. She closed the notebook and looked at him directly. But today was different. Today was supposed to be about me. After 15 years of putting myself last, I was going to walk across that stage and have my family cheer for me. Instead, you all chose to party at my sister's house. We were celebrating you. No, you were celebrating with her. There's a difference. Marissa stood up and walked to the kitchen counter, where a manila envelope sat waiting. I got a call today during the ceremony. From a publisher. Robert looked confused by the subject change. A publisher? Remember those essays I've been writing for the past 2 years? The ones about marriage and family life that I shared in my writing group. Marissa opened the envelope and pulled out a contract. Apparently, one of the women in my group sent them to her friend who works in publishing. They want to turn them into a memoir. A memoir about what? About being invisible. About being the woman who takes care of everyone else but gets forgotten when it matters. About what happens when you give so much of yourself away that you disappear. Marissa held up the contract. They're offering me $100,000 advance. Robert's mouth fell open. $100,000? For writing? For my story. Our story. The story of a woman who spent 15 years being a perfect wife and mother and got nothing in return but empty seats at her graduation. You can't write about our personal life. I can write about my personal life. And I will. Marissa signed the contract with a pen she'd bought specifically for this moment. I've already started. The first chapter is called The Empty Auditorium. Robert stood up, pacing now. This is insane. You're throwing away our marriage because of one mistake. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm finally picking something up. Marissa gathered her papers. Me. I'm picking up my life and making it about me for the first time in 15 years. What about the girls? You're going to destroy their family because you're angry about a party? The girls are 16 years old. They're old enough to understand that their mother deserves basic respect. If they can't understand that, then I've failed them as a parent anyway. Marissa walked toward the stairs, then turned back. You can sleep in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow you can stay with your brother while we work out the details. Marissa, please. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. She paused on the bottom step. Robert, you didn't even ask me how the ceremony went. In all of this panic and explaining and apologizing, you never once asked if I was proud when they called my name, or if the speech was good, or how it felt to finally finish something I'd been working on for half my adult life. Robert opened his mouth, then closed it again. The ceremony was beautiful, Marissa said quietly. The speaker talked about perseverance and the courage it takes to pursue your dreams later in life. When they called my name, I walked across that stage and shook hands with the dean, and for just a moment I felt proud of myself. She started up the stairs. That feeling lasted about 30 seconds until I realized I was completely alone. But you know what? I'd rather be alone and visible than surrounded by people who don't see me at all. The sound of her footsteps disappeared down the hallway, leaving Robert standing in the kitchen with the signed divorce papers and the echo of his wife's quiet revolution. 3 weeks later, Marissa stood in the doorway of her new apartment, holding the last box from her old life. The space was small, a one-bedroom unit in a complex near downtown, but it was entirely hers. The morning light streamed through windows that she'd chosen, illuminating walls painted in colors she'd picked without consulting anyone else. Soft blue in the living room. Warm yellow in the kitchen. She'd never realized how much she'd missed having opinions about her own space. Her phone buzzed with another text from Robert. "The girls miss you. Can we at least talk about custody arrangements?" She'd been staying in a hotel for the past week while the apartment was being prepared. Robert had alternated between anger, pleading, and threats. The girls had been mostly silent, confused by their mother's sudden transformation from doormat to decision-maker. Marissa set the box down and surveyed her new home. The furniture was second-hand but carefully chosen. A small dining table where she could spread out her writing. A comfortable chair by the window for reading. Bookshelves that would actually hold her books instead of everyone else's clutter. She opened her laptop and read the email from her publisher, Patricia Chin, who'd been incredibly supportive during the transition. "Marissa, the first 3 chapters are phenomenal. Your voice is authentic and powerful. We'd like to discuss a timeline for the full manuscript. Can you have a draft completed by January? Also, we're interested in exploring opportunities for speaking engagements and interviews. Your story is going to resonate with a lot of women." A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Through the peephole, she saw Sierra and Amber standing in the hallway, looking uncomfortable and unsure. She opened the door, and they stood there for a moment without speaking. Finally, Sierra, the more outgoing twin, stepped forward. "Mom? Can we come in?" "Of course." Marissa stepped aside, watching as her daughters entered her new space. They looked around with curious eyes, taking in the unfamiliar environment. "It's nice," Amber said quietly. She'd always been the more thoughtful of the two. "Very, you. Thank you." Marissa gestured toward the small couch. "Sit down. Can I get you something to drink?" The girls perched on the edge of the sofa like birds ready to fly away. Sierra fidgeted with her phone while Amber stared out the window. "Dad said you're writing a book," Sierra finally said. "I am. About us." Marissa sat in her reading chair, choosing her words carefully. "About me. About my experiences as a wife and mother. About what it's like to feel invisible in your own life." "Are you going to make us look bad?" Amber asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question broke Marissa's heart. "Sweetheart, this isn't about making anyone look bad. It's about telling the truth about what happened to me, how I lost myself, and how I'm finding my way back." Sierra looked up from her phone. "But you're going to talk about the graduation thing, right? Everyone at school already knows about it." Aunt Delilah posted pictures all over social media. "Yes, I'll probably write about that day. Do you know how embarrassing this is for us?" Sierra's voice rose. "Our friends are asking why our mom left our dad because he missed one stupid ceremony. They think you're having a midlife crisis or something." Marissa felt the familiar urge to apologize, to smooth things over, to minimize her own feelings for the comfort of others. But she caught herself. "I understand this is difficult for you both. Divorce is hard on children even when they're almost adults. But this isn't about one missed ceremony, Sierra. This is about 15 years of being taken for granted." "We never took you for granted," Sierra protested. "When was the last time either of you thanked me for doing your laundry?" The girls exchanged glances. "When was the last time you helped me cook dinner without being asked? Or noticed when I was sad or stressed? Or asked about my day at work?" Amber shifted uncomfortably. We thought that's what moms did." "It is what moms do. But moms are also people. We have feelings and needs and dreams that go beyond taking care of our families." Marissa leaned forward. "Can you tell me one thing I've wanted for myself in the past 5 years? One goal or dream that wasn't about you two or your father?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. "See," Marissa said gently. "I disappeared. Not just to you but to myself. I became so focused on being the perfect wife and mother that I forgot I was also supposed to be Marissa." Sierra's eyes filled with tears. "So you just decided to leave us?" "I decided to find myself. There's a difference." Marissa moved to sit beside her daughters on the couch. "I love you both more than anything in this world. But love doesn't mean I have to disappear. Love doesn't mean I have to accept being forgotten and overlooked. Dad feels terrible, Amber said. He keeps saying he should have known better. Your father is a good man who got comfortable letting me handle everything. He's not a villain, girls. He's just someone who stopped seeing me as a full person and started seeing me as a function. Marissa took their hands. The same way you both did. What does that mean? Sierra asked. It means you saw me as Mom the cook, Mom the chauffeur, Mom the problem solver. You stopped seeing me as Marissa the person with her own thoughts and feelings and accomplishments. The girls sat quietly, processing this information. Are you going to make us choose between you and Dad? Amber asked. No. You're almost 18. You can have relationships with both of us. But I need you to understand something important. Marissa looked at each of them seriously. I will never again accept being treated as invisible. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be based on mutual respect. That means considering my feelings, acknowledging my efforts, and treating me like a person who matters. Of course you matter, Sierra said. Then prove it. Not with words but with actions. Show up when I need you. Listen when I talk. See me as more than just someone who exists to serve your needs. Amber wiped her eyes. I never thought about it like that. I thought you liked taking care of us. I do like taking care of you. But I also like taking care of myself. I like having my own interests and accomplishments and dreams. I like being proud of myself sometimes instead of only being proud of other people. The girls stayed for another hour, walking through the apartment, asking questions about her new life. When they left, they really hugged her, not the distracted embraces she'd grown used to. Mom? Sierra said as they reached the door. Yes. I'm proud of you for graduating. I should have said that before. After they left, Marissa sat at her dining table and opened her laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank page titled Chapter 4, Learning to Breathe. She began to type. For 15 years I held my breath. I held it through forgotten anniversaries and canceled plans. I held it through late nights doing everyone else's laundry and early mornings packing everyone else's lunches. I held it through family gatherings where I served the food and cleaned the dishes while everyone else made memories. I held my breath so long I forgot what it felt like to breathe. But on the day of my graduation, sitting alone in that auditorium, I finally exhaled. And in the silence that followed, I heard something I hadn't heard in years, my own voice asking to be heard. The words flowed easily now, 15 years of held breath released onto the page. Outside her window, the sun was setting over a city full of possibilities, and for the first time in years, Marissa was awake to see it. The call came at 7 in the morning, 2 weeks after the girls' visit. Marissa was sitting at her dining table with coffee and her laptop, working on Chapter 6 of her memoir, when her phone rang. Delilah appeared on the screen. Marissa let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message while sipping her coffee. Marissa, we need to talk. People are asking questions about what happened at your graduation, and it's affecting my business. Call me back. She deleted the message and went back to her writing. 20 minutes later, her sister called again. This time, Marissa answered. What's so urgent, Delilah? Finally. I've been trying to reach you for days. We need to discuss the situation you've created. What situation is that? Don't play dumb with me. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Mrs. Henderson from the Neighborhood Association asked me why I threw a party during your graduation ceremony. She made it sound like I sabotaged you on purpose. Marissa saved her document and leaned back in her chair. Didn't you? Of course not. I was trying to do something nice for you. I thought a family barbecue would be more meaningful than sitting through some boring ceremony. Without asking me. I tried to ask you. You're always so busy with school and work and Robert's needs. I figured it would be easier to just handle the planning myself. You lied to Robert. You told him I had agreed to skip my graduation for your party. Silence on the other end. Delilah? Look, maybe I exaggerated a little bit about what we discussed. But I really thought you'd prefer a family celebration. You've never been one for big public displays. Marissa felt the familiar frustration rising, the same feeling she'd had countless times over the years when her sister manipulated situations to her advantage. But this time, instead of swallowing her anger, she spoke clearly. Let me make sure I understand. You decided I wouldn't want to attend my own graduation ceremony. You lied to my husband to get him to bring my children to your house instead. You posted pictures all over social media of my family celebrating my achievement without me. And now you're calling because it's making you look bad. You're making it sound worse than it was. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you couldn't stand the idea of one day being about me instead of you. Just like when we were kids and you'd get sick every time I had a birthday party. Or when I got engaged and you announced your pregnancy the same week. Or when I started college and you suddenly needed emergency surgery that turned out to be nothing. That's not fair. Those were coincidences. 38 years of coincidences, Delilah. I'm finally tired of them. Fine. Maybe I should have handled things differently. But this whole divorce thing is insane. You're destroying your family over one misunderstanding. I'm not destroying anything. I'm finally building something, a life where I matter. What about Robert? He's a mess. He comes over here crying, asking me to talk to you. And the girls are confused and hurt. Robert is an adult who made choices. The girls are learning that actions have consequences. And you? Marissa paused, choosing her words carefully. You're learning that I'm not your backup plan anymore. What does that mean? It means I won't be available to bail you out financially when your business struggles. I won't be your free babysitter when you want to travel. I won't be your emergency contact when you need someone responsible to handle your problems. I never asked you to do those things. You didn't have to ask. I just did them because that's what I always did. But I'm done being the invisible woman who fixes everyone else's life while her own falls apart. Delilah's voice took on the wheedling tone Marissa knew so well. Come on, Riss. Don't be like this. We're sisters. Family is supposed to stick together. Family is supposed to show up for each other. Family is supposed to consider each other's feelings. Family is supposed to celebrate each other's successes instead of undermining them. I was trying to celebrate you. No, you were trying to control the narrative. You wanted to be the sister who threw the party, not the sister who sat in the audience and watched someone else be the center of attention for once. The line went quiet for a long moment. Mrs. Patterson is asking questions too, Delilah finally said. She wants to know why the whole family chose my party over your graduation. It's making me look bad in the neighborhood. Then maybe you should tell her the truth. What truth? That you lied to get them there. That you manipulated the situation for your own benefit. That you've been doing it for so long you don't even recognize it anymore. I'm not admitting to anything like that. It would ruin my reputation. Your reputation? Marissa laughed, but there was no humor in it. Delilah, I'm writing a book. About my life, my marriage, my family. About what it's like to be the invisible woman who holds everyone together while they pursue their own interests. You can't write about me without my permission. I can write about my own experiences. And my experiences include having a sister who has undermined me at every major milestone in my life. If you publish lies about me, I'll sue you. They're not lies, Delilah. They're just not the version of events you prefer. Marissa stood up and walked to her window. My publisher is very interested in the family dynamics. They think readers will relate to the woman who always comes second to her sister's needs. You wouldn't. Already have. Chapter 7 is called The Sister Who Steals Spotlights. It's about growing up with someone who couldn't let anyone else have a moment of recognition. Delilah's voice rose to a shriek. You can't do this to me. I have a business to protect. You should have thought about that before you sabotaged my graduation. I was trying to help. No, Delilah. You were trying to be the star of someone else's story. But this is my story now, and I'm finally the main character. Marissa ended the call and immediately blocked her sister's number. Then she sat back down at her laptop and continued writing. 2 hours later, Robert called. Marissa, Delilah is hysterical. She says you're going to ruin her reputation with some book. Please tell me you're not actually planning to publish private family information. I'm planning to publish my story, Robert. The story of a woman who lost herself in service to others. But it's not just your story. It involves all of us. Every memoir involves other people. That's how life works. Can't you change the names? Make it fiction or something? I could. But I won't. Marissa saved her work and closed the laptop. For 15 years, I protected everyone else's reputation while mine didn't exist. I made sure you looked like the devoted husband, the girls looked like the perfect daughters, and Delilah looked like the supportive sister. But I looked like nothing because no one was paying attention to me. That's not true. Robert, you forgot our anniversary. You missed my graduation. You've introduced me as just my wife for 15 years. When exactly were you paying attention to my reputation? I never meant to make you feel invisible. But you did. And now I'm becoming visible on my own terms. Marissa walked to her kitchen and started making lunch for one person, at a time that worked for her schedule. My publisher wants to schedule some interviews. Local radio stations, maybe some podcasts. They think my story will resonate with women who feel forgotten in their own lives. Jesus, Marissa. This is really happening, isn't it? Yes, it's really happening. And Robert? You might want to prepare yourself and the girls. The book comes out in 8 months and there's going to be publicity. After she hung up, Marissa made herself a grilled cheese sandwich, something she'd never bothered to do when she was always cooking elaborate meals for everyone else. She ate it slowly, savoring the quiet of her apartment and the freedom to eat what she wanted when she wanted. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sierra. Dad says you're going to be on the radio talking about us. Is that true? Marissa typed back, I'm going to be talking about me. About what it was like to be your mother while losing myself in the process. Can we read the book before it comes out? If you want to. Will it hurt our feelings? Marissa stared at the question for a long time before responding. It might. But sometimes the truth hurts before it heals. And I think our family needs some healing. That evening, Marissa attended her first book reading at a local coffee shop. It was a small event, maybe 20 people in folding chairs, listening to authors share their work. When her turn came, she read from chapter 3, about the night she'd kept track of how many times her family interrupted her while she was studying. After she finished, a woman in the back row raised her hand. How long did it take you to realize you'd disappeared? 15 years, Marissa answered honestly. But it happened so gradually I didn't notice. One day I just looked around and realized I couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked me what I wanted. Another woman spoke up. My husband forgot my birthday last month. We've been married for 12 years and he's never forgotten before. I keep wondering if it's a sign of something bigger. Trust your instincts, Marissa said. If you feel invisible, you probably are. But the good news is visibility is a choice. It just takes courage to make it. After the reading, several women approached her with their own stories. A teacher whose family scheduled everything during her spring break, assuming she'd be available. A nurse whose husband made plans without consulting her because, you're always working anyway. A mother whose children only called when they needed something. As Marissa drove home that night, she realized something profound had happened. For the first time in years, she'd been seen not as someone's wife or mother or sister, but as herself. She'd shared her truth and other women had recognized themselves in it. Her phone was full of missed calls and angry texts from Robert and Delilah, but she didn't read them. Instead, she went to her computer and wrote. Chapter 8, The Day I Became Real. Today, I stood in front of strangers and told them about being invisible. And something magical happened, they saw me. Not the wife, not the mother, not the sister. They saw Marissa, the woman with her own story worth telling. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't disappear when someone needed something. I didn't make myself smaller to make others comfortable. I just stood there, fully present in my own life and let myself be seen. It turns out, visibility isn't something other people give you. It's something you give yourself. The therapy office was nothing like Marissa had expected. Dr. Sarah Williams was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner that made Marissa feel immediately comfortable. Tell me why you're here, Dr. Williams said, settling into her chair with a cup of tea. My husband thinks I'm having a nervous breakdown because I filed for divorce after he missed my graduation, Marissa said. My sister thinks I'm being vindictive. My daughters think I'm going through a midlife crisis. So I thought maybe I should talk to someone who might have a different perspective. Dr. Williams smiled. And what do you think you're going through? I think I'm waking up for the first time in 15 years. Over the next hour, Marissa found herself telling the story she'd been writing in her book, but from a different angle. Dr. Williams asked questions that made her think about patterns she'd never noticed before. When did you first learn that your needs came last? Dr. Williams asked. Marissa thought about it. Growing up, my mother was always overwhelmed. Dad worked long hours and she had Delilah and me to manage. Delilah was dramatic. She needed a lot of attention. I learned early that the way to help Mom was to not need anything. So you became the easy child. The invisible child, Marissa corrected. I got good grades, did my chores, stayed out of trouble. I thought that was what love looked like, making yourself small so other people could be big. And you carried that pattern into your marriage. Without even realizing it. Robert was ambitious, driven. He had big dreams for his business. The girls were active, involved in everything. I just supported everyone else's dreams and forgot I was supposed to have my own. Dr. Williams made notes. What did little Marissa want to be when she grew up? The question caught her off guard. I wanted to write. I used to write stories all the time as a kid. I dreamed of being a journalist, maybe writing for a magazine. What happened to that dream? Life, I guess. College was expensive, so I went to community college and got an associate's degree in office administration. Something practical. Then I met Robert and he was so sure about what he wanted. It was easier to support his dreams than figure out my own. And now you're writing a book. Marissa smiled. Now I'm writing a book. It's funny, I thought I'd forgotten how to write, but the words just pour out now. Like they've been waiting 15 years to be heard. After therapy, Marissa drove to her writing group meeting. She joined the group 6 months before her graduation, partly for the social work program but mostly because she'd missed having creative outlet. The group met every Thursday evening in the back room of a bookstore downtown. There were 8 regular members. Janet, a retired teacher writing a historical novel, Marcus, a young poet fresh out of college, Elena, a social worker documenting immigration stories, Tom, a widower writing about his late wife, Priya, a tech worker who wrote science fiction, Carl, a veteran working on a war memoir, and Rachel, a mother of 3 writing about parenting through mental illness. Tonight, the topic was truth in memoir. How do you balance honesty with kindness? Janet asked the group. I'm writing about my mother, who was difficult, but I don't want to hurt my siblings who remember her differently. Truth isn't always kind, Carl said. In my experience, sugar-coating the hard parts does a disservice to the reader and to yourself. Elena nodded. In my immigration interviews, I've learned that people need their whole story to be acknowledged, even the painful parts. Especially the painful parts. Marissa had been quiet, but now she spoke up. I'm struggling with this too. My family is angry that I'm writing about our private life. They want me to protect their reputations, but protecting their comfort means silencing my truth. What does your truth serve? Tom asked gently. For me, writing about my wife's depression helps other people feel less alone. That purpose makes the discomfort worth it. I keep getting emails from women who heard me read excerpts, Marissa said. They tell me stories about feeling invisible in their own lives, about supporting everyone else's dreams while forgetting their own. I think my truth serves them. Rachel leaned forward. My husband was horrified when I started writing about my postpartum depression. He thought it would make him look like a bad father. But after the first piece was published, 3 of my friends admitted they'd struggled too. They thanked me for making them feel less alone. So the question is, Elena said, who are you protecting by staying silent, and who are you serving by speaking up? After the meeting, Marissa and Elena walked out together. Elena was a few years younger, but her work with immigrant families had given her a wisdom about survival that Marissa appreciated. You know what I've learned from my clients? Elena said as they reached their cars. The women who recover fastest from trauma are the ones who learn to tell their story. Not the version that makes everyone else comfortable, but the real version. The one that honors what actually happened to them. But what if telling the truth costs me my family? What if staying silent costs you yourself? Elena countered. Besides, families can survive truth. They can't survive denial. The next morning, Marissa woke up to an email from Patricia, her publisher. The early readers are responding incredibly well to your sample chapters. We'd like to discuss accelerating the publication timeline and exploring a book tour. Can we schedule a call? A book tour. 6 months ago, Marissa had been making grocery lists and coordinating carpools. Now she was potentially going to travel around the country talking about her experiences. Her phone rang. It was Jerome, a colleague from the medical office where she worked. They'd been talking more since her separation and he'd asked her out twice. She'd said no both times, not ready for romance while her life was in transition. Good morning. His voice was warm and familiar. I was wondering if you'd like to grab coffee before work. I have something I'd like to discuss with you. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. I have an idea I'd like to run by you. An hour later, they sat in a cafe near their office. Jerome was a physical therapist, a quiet man in his early 40s who'd been divorced for 3 years. He had 2 teenage sons and a gentle manner that had always made Marissa feel comfortable. I heard you reading from your book at the library last week, he said, stirring his coffee. I hope you don't mind that I came. I was curious about what you were writing. You were there? Marissa hadn't noticed him in the audience. In the back. I didn't want to make you nervous. Jerome smiled. It was powerful, Marissa. The way you talked about becoming invisible, it made me think about my own marriage. How I probably made my ex-wife feel unseen without realizing it. That wasn't the point of the reading. Maybe not, but it was the effect. At least for me. Jerome leaned forward. I wanted to ask you something. My divorce support group has been looking for someone to speak to us about rebuilding identity after marriage. Would you consider it? Marissa was surprised. I'm not really qualified for that. You're living it. That's more qualification than most people have. Jerome's expression was earnest. These are people who lost themselves in relationships and are trying to figure out who they are alone. Your story could help them. I don't know. Think about it. No pressure. Jerome checked his watch. We should probably head to work. But Marissa? What you're doing, the writing, the speaking, the courage to change your life, it's inspiring. I hope you know that. As they walked to the office, Marissa felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The sensation of being seen clearly by someone who appreciated what they saw. Not her usefulness or her sacrifice, but her strength and her voice. That evening, she called Patricia to discuss the book tour possibility. We're thinking 8 to 10 cities, Patricia said. Bookstores, libraries, maybe some women's organizations. The early response suggests there's real hunger for this story. I've never done anything like that before. You've been doing it already. Every time you share your writing, every time you tell your story, you're connecting with women who need to hear it. A tour just expands your audience. After they hung up, Marissa opened her laptop and started a new chapter. Chapter 9, Learning to Take Up Space. There's a moment in every woman's awakening when she realizes she's been apologizing for existing. She's been making herself smaller, quieter, more convenient. She's been asking permission to have needs and opinions and dreams. I spent 15 years asking permission to matter in my own life. Now I'm learning to take up space without apology. To speak without prefacing every statement with, I might be wrong, but. To pursue my goals without explaining why I deserve them. It's terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely necessary. Because the world doesn't need another invisible woman. It needs women who know their own worth and aren't afraid to claim it. Outside her window, the city sparkled with possibility, and for the first time since her marriage began, Marissa felt like she belonged to herself. The law office was sleek and intimidating, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown. Marissa sat across from her attorney, Lisa Rodriguez, reviewing the latest papers from Robert's lawyer. He's contesting the divorce terms, Lisa said, pointing to the highlighted sections. He wants half of your book advance, claiming it's marital property since you wrote it while married. Marissa nearly choked on her coffee. Half of my book advance. The book about how my marriage made me invisible. That's the irony, isn't it? Lisa, a sharp woman in her 40s, had built her reputation on complex divorce cases. He's arguing that since you used shared experiences in the book, he's entitled to compensation. Those aren't shared experiences. They're my experiences of being ignored and overlooked. I agree, but his attorney is creative. They're also claiming you misrepresented your financial situation when you emptied the joint account. Marissa pulled out her notebook, the same one she'd shown Robert the night of her graduation. I documented everything. Every loan I made to family members, every time I covered expenses when he couldn't. The money I took was mine to begin with. Lisa flipped through the pages, impressed. This is excellent documentation. But there's something else. He's filed a motion requesting that you cease publication of the book until after the divorce is finalized. He wants to stop my book? He's claiming it will damage his reputation and interfere with his business. His lawyer is arguing that you're publishing private marital information for profit. Marissa felt the familiar anger rising, but this time it came with clarity instead of confusion. Lisa, I need you to understand something. For 15 years, I protected his reputation. I never told anyone when he forgot important dates or made financial mistakes. I never complained when his business ventures failed and I had to cover the bills. I was the perfect wife who made him look good. And now I'm telling my truth. And if my truth makes him look bad, that's not my problem anymore. Lisa made notes. We can fight this. Your book advance isn't marital property, it's compensation for your individual creative work. And as for the publication, you have First Amendment protections. But it might get messy. How messy? Depositions. Financial records. Character witnesses. He might try to paint you as vindictive or unstable. Marissa thought about Dr. Williams' question from their last session. What are you afraid of losing by standing up for yourself? Let him try, she said finally. I have 15 years of receipts showing exactly who I am and what I've contributed to this family. 2 weeks later, Marissa sat in a conference room facing Robert and his attorney across a polished table. It was their first face-to-face meeting since she'd moved out, and he looked terrible. He'd lost weight and there were dark circles under his eyes. Mrs. Johnson, Robert's attorney, a stern man named Philip Wright, began, My client is willing to be reasonable about the divorce terms, but he has serious concerns about your book project. Such as? Lisa asked. It contains private information about their marriage, their children, and their extended family. Publishing these details without consent could be considered defamation. It's memoir, Lisa responded. She's writing about her own experiences. Experiences that involve other people who haven't consented to having their private lives made public. Wright pulled out a folder. We have statements from family members expressing concern about how they're portrayed. Lisa glanced at Marissa, who nodded slightly. May we see these statements? Lisa asked. Wright handed over the papers. Marissa recognized Delilah's handwriting immediately, and her mother-in-law's careful script. Delilah's statement claimed that Marissa was exaggerating family conflicts for dramatic effect, and that the book would damage innocent people for profit. Robert's mother described Marissa as bitter and vindictive following the divorce. These are character assassinations, not legal documents, Lisa said after reviewing them. They're evidence of the harm this publication could cause, Wright replied. Robert finally spoke up. Marissa, please. Can't we work this out privately? The girls are already getting questions at school. Your book will make everything worse. Marissa looked at the man she'd been married to for 15 years. She felt something she hadn't expected, pity. Robert, do you remember what you said to me the night I told you about the book deal? I was upset. I probably said things I didn't mean. You said I couldn't write about our personal life. That it wasn't just my story. Marissa kept her voice steady. But you never asked me what was in the book. You never asked how I was feeling or what I needed to heal. You just tried to control the narrative the same way you always did. That's not true. Isn't it? When I was working 2 jobs to pay for your business startup, did you ask how I felt about it? When I gave my inheritance money to Delilah, did you ask if I was comfortable with that decision? When I spent 15 years putting everyone else's needs first, did you ever ask what I needed? Robert shifted uncomfortably. I thought you were happy. You thought I was convenient. There's a difference. Wright cleared his throat. Mrs. Johnson, my client is prepared to offer a generous settlement if you agree to modify the book to protect the family's privacy. What kind of modifications? Change the names, alter identifying details, perhaps frame it as fiction rather than memoir. So you want me to make my truth more comfortable for you. We want to protect innocent parties from unnecessary embarrassment. Lisa leaned forward. Mr. Wright, your client forgot his wife's graduation ceremony, one of the most important days of her life. He prioritized a barbecue over her achievement. Exactly which part of that should she be protecting him from? The graduation incident was a misunderstanding. No, Marissa interrupted. Was a pattern. And that pattern is what my book is about. Not just the graduation, but 15 years of being treated as if my feelings and achievements didn't matter. She turned to Robert. You want to know what's in the book? It's about the woman who worked overtime to pay for everyone else's dreams. Who gave up her inheritance to support your sister's business ventures. Who studied for her degree while cooking dinner and doing laundry because no one else thought to help. It's about the woman who disappeared so completely that her own family forgot she existed. Robert's face had gone pale. And yes, it's about the graduation. But that's just the final chapter of a much longer story. Wright shuffled his papers. Mrs. Johnson, publishing this book could seriously damage my client's business reputation. His reputation should reflect his actions, Marissa said simply. The mediation continued for 3 hours, but ultimately they reached an impasse. Robert's team wanted control over the book's content, and Marissa refused to give it. As they gathered their papers to leave, Robert approached her. Marissa, I know I made mistakes. But did I really hurt you so badly that you want to destroy our family publicly? She looked at him sadly. Robert, I'm not destroying our family. I'm finally telling the truth about what our family cost me. There's a difference. The girls are going to hate this. They're going to hate you. Maybe. But they'll know who their mother really is, not just who she pretended to be to keep everyone comfortable. That evening, Marissa called Patricia with an update. They can't stop publication, Patricia said after hearing the details. Your book doesn't contain anything defamatory, it's your personal experience. And frankly, their reaction is just proving your point about being silenced. I keep wondering if I'm being selfish. Marissa, you spent 15 years being selfless. Maybe it's time to try being self-full instead. As she hung up, Marissa opened her laptop to find an email from a woman in Portland. Dear Marissa, I heard you read from your book at the library last month. Your words gave me the courage to leave my own invisible life. I wanted you to know that your truth is helping other women find theirs. Please don't let anyone silence your voice. We need to hear it. Marissa printed the email and tucked it into her notebook, right next to her financial records and legal documents. Evidence that her truth mattered to more than just herself. The legal battle might be messy, but her voice was finally strong enough to weather it. The job interview was at a nonprofit organization focused on supporting women transitioning out of domestic violence situations. Marissa had applied for a social work position 3 weeks ago, before she knew if her book would be successful enough to support her. "Tell me about your experience with women in crisis," the director, Nancy Foster, asked from across her cluttered desk. "Honestly, I was one of them until recently," Marissa said. "Not domestic violence in the traditional sense, but domestic invisibility. I spent 15 years disappearing in my own life." Nancy, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward with interest. "Domestic invisibility. I haven't heard that term before. I might have made it up. But it describes what happens when you become so focused on serving others that you forget you exist. When your identity becomes completely wrapped up in being useful to other people." "And how did you escape that pattern?" Marissa told her about the graduation, the divorce, the book. Nancy listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "The thing is," Marissa concluded, "I realized that emotional neglect can be just as damaging as physical abuse. When someone consistently ignores your feelings, dismisses your needs, and treats you as invisible, it destroys your sense of self-worth." Nancy nodded thoughtfully. "Many of our clients struggle with that. They leave physically abusive situations, but they still think they don't deserve better. They've been conditioned to believe their needs don't matter." "Exactly. And traditional therapy approaches don't always address that kind of conditioning. Sometimes women need to hear from someone who's been there, someone who learned to value herself after years of being devalued." "Would you be comfortable sharing your story with clients?" "I think that might be exactly what I'm meant to do." Nancy smiled. "When can you start?" 2 days later, Marissa walked into her new office, a small space with a window overlooking a community garden. She'd been hired as a transition counselor, working with women who were rebuilding their lives after leaving difficult relationships. Her first client was a woman named Brenda, 35 years old with 2 young children. "I know I should be grateful," Brenda said, perched nervously on the edge of her chair. "He never hit me or anything. But I feel like I lost myself somewhere along the way." "Tell me about that," Marissa said, recognizing the familiar story already beginning to unfold. "I used to paint. Before we got married, I was actually pretty good. I sold a few pieces, had some shows at local galleries. But after the kids came, there was never time." He said art was a nice hobby, but family had to come first. "What happened to your supplies?" "I gave them away last year." He said they were taking up too much space in the garage. Brenda's voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't argue. I never argued." "When was the last time you made a decision just for yourself?" Brenda stared at her hands for a long moment. "I honestly can't remember." Marissa opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small canvas and a set of watercolor pencils. "These are yours now. You don't have to paint anything specific, but I want you to have them. Just in case you remember who you were before you disappeared." That evening, Marissa met Jerome for dinner. It was their 4th official date, and she was surprised by how comfortable she felt with him. He listened when she talked, asked thoughtful questions, and never tried to fix her problems for her. "How was your first day at the new job?" he asked as they looked over menus. "Heartbreaking and hopeful at the same time. I met a woman today who could have been me 5 years ago." Marissa set down her menu. She gave away her art supplies because her husband said they took up too much space. "That's terrible." "The terrible part is that she thought it was normal. She's been conditioned to believe that her interests don't matter." Marissa picked up her water glass. "I gave her some art supplies. It's a small thing, but sometimes small things can crack open possibilities." Jerome smiled. "You're good at this, aren't you? Helping people see their worth." "I'm learning. It's easier to help other people recognize their value than it was to recognize my own." "What changed that for you?" Marissa thought about it. "Hitting bottom, I think. Sitting alone at my graduation ceremony, realizing that I'd become so invisible that my own family had forgotten I existed. It was devastating, but it was also clarifying." "How so?" "When you have nothing left to lose, you finally have the freedom to choose who you want to be." After dinner, they walked through downtown, past the bookstore where Marissa attended her writing group. "Can I ask you something?" Jerome said as they paused in front of the bookstore window. "Are you worried about dating while going through a divorce?" "I know it's complicated." Marissa appreciated his directness. "I'm worried about a lot of things. But not about this." "This?" Getting to know you. Figuring out who I am when I'm not trying to be what someone else needs. She turned to face him. For 15 years, I shaped myself around Robert's expectations. I don't want to do that again with anyone. What if I don't have expectations? What if I just want to know who you actually are? The question made her chest tight with unexpected emotion. No one's ever asked me that before. Then it's about time someone did. The next morning brought a call from Patricia with exciting news. The early reviews are fantastic, she said. Publishers Weekly called it a powerful examination of emotional invisibility in modern marriage. And we've got interview requests from 3 national podcasts. National podcasts? Your story is resonating, Marissa. Women are sharing excerpts on social media, book clubs are requesting advance copies. This is going to be bigger than we initially thought. After hanging up, Marissa sat in her apartment, looking around at the space she'd created for herself. It was still small, still modestly furnished, but it was entirely hers. Her books on the shelves, her coffee mug in the sink, her schedule on the refrigerator. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sierra. Mom, can we talk? I've been thinking about what you said about seeing you as a person. Of course. Want to come over for dinner tonight? Yes. And Mom? I'm proud of you. I should have said that a long time ago. Marissa smiled, remembering Dr. Williams' words from their last session. Healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in relationship, but only in relationships where you're allowed to exist fully. She was finally learning to exist fully, and it turned out the world had room for her after all. That evening, as she cooked dinner for herself and Sierra, simple pasta with vegetables, no elaborate menu planning required, Marissa opened her laptop and wrote. Chapter 10, The Geography of Self. I used to think that love meant erasing yourself for others. That being a good wife and mother required disappearing so completely that only your functions remained. Cook, cleaner, supporter, problem solver. Never just Marissa. But I've learned something surprising. When you insist on being seen as a whole person, the people who truly love you will adjust their vision. They'll learn to see you clearly instead of asking you to become invisible again. And the people who can't make that adjustment? They reveal that they never loved you anyway. They loved your usefulness, your compliance, your willingness to be small. The geography of self isn't about choosing between loving others and loving yourself. It's about refusing to love from a place of self-erasure. It's about taking up space and insisting that your presence matters. It's about coming home to yourself. 6 months later, Marissa stood in front of a packed bookstore, looking out at an audience of over 100 women. The launch event for Invisible Woman, Reclaiming Your Life After Emotional Disappearance, had sold out within hours of being announced. Thank you all for being here tonight, she began, her voice steady and clear. 8 months ago, I sat alone at my college graduation ceremony while my family celebrated my achievement without me. That day, I realized I had become so invisible in my own life that even I had forgotten I existed. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Tonight, I want to talk about what happens when invisible women decide to become visible again. Not just for ourselves, but for every woman who's sitting in the back row of her own life, wondering if she matters. As she read from Chapter 3 the night, she documented how many times her family had interrupted her while studying. She could see women throughout the audience nodding in recognition. Some had tears in their eyes. During the Q&A afterward, hands shot up immediately. How do you handle the guilt? Asked a woman in her 40s. I've started saying no to things, but I feel terrible about it. Guilt is the price we pay for changing patterns that no longer serve us, Marissa replied. But ask yourself, is your guilt about actually hurting someone, or is it about not being convenient anymore? A younger woman raised her hand. My husband says I'm being selfish since I started putting myself first sometimes. How do you know when you're being reasonable versus actually being selfish? In my experience, women who worry about being selfish rarely are. We've been so conditioned to put ourselves last that basic self-care feels revolutionary. Marissa paused. Ask yourself, if your best friend treated herself the way you treat yourself, what would you tell her? After the official event ended, a line of women waited to have their books signed. Each one had a story. I've been married for 22 years, one woman whispered. Reading your book made me realize I can't remember the last time my husband asked about my day. I gave up my career when my kids were born, another said. They're in college now and I don't know who I am anymore. My sister always makes everything about her, just like yours. I thought I was crazy for feeling resentful. Near the end of the line, Sierra and Amber approached with their copies of the book. Hi, Mom, Sierra said, looking nervous. We wanted to surprise you. Marissa felt tears threaten. You came. We read the book, Amber said quietly. We wanted to apologize. In person. Sierra stepped forward. Mom, we're so sorry. We had no idea how we made you feel. Reading about it, it was hard to recognize ourselves. But we want to do better, Amber added. We want to have a real relationship with you, not just expect you to take care of us. Marissa came around the table and hugged both her daughters. I love you both. And I'm proud that you're learning this lesson at 18 instead of 38. Are you happy? Sierra asked. Really happy, not just pretending? I'm learning to be happy. There's a difference. Marissa smiled. But yes, I think I am. The last person in line was Robert. He looked older, more weathered, but there was something different in his expression. Congratulations, he said, holding a copy of the book. I bought this a week ago. I've read it twice. And I owe you an apology that's about 15 years overdue. Robert's voice was thick with emotion. I had no idea, Marissa. I mean, I knew you did a lot, but I didn't understand what it cost you. I didn't either for a long time. The chapter about our anniversary, I remembered that night completely differently. In my memory, I was being responsible, helping family. But reading your perspective. He shook his head. I was an ass. You weren't malicious, Robert. You just stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. Is there any chance? He began, then stopped. No, never mind. That's not fair to ask. What? I was going to ask if we could try again. But that would be selfish, wouldn't it? Asking you to come back after you've finally found yourself. Marissa looked at this man she'd spent 15 years with. She felt compassion for him, but no desire to return to the life they'd shared. Robert, I hope you find someone who can love you without disappearing. And I hope you love her enough to make sure she doesn't have to. He nodded sadly and walked away. An hour later, Marissa sat with Jerome, Patricia, and her writing group friends at a nearby restaurant, celebrating the successful launch. To Marissa, Rachel raised her glass, for having the courage to tell the truth even when it was uncomfortable. To invisible women everywhere, Elena added, who are learning to take up space. As the evening wound down, Marissa's phone buzzed with notifications. The book had hit the bestseller list on Amazon. 3 more interview requests had come in. A woman in Seattle had started a book club called Visible Women, based on the memoir. How does it feel? Jerome asked as they walked to their cars. All this success, all this recognition? Marissa considered the question. Surreal. 6 months ago, I was afraid to ask for a day off work. Now I'm on bestseller lists and getting interview requests. Do you miss the quiet life? I miss the simplicity sometimes. But I don't miss being invisible. She looked up at the stars, barely visible in the city light. I spent so many years thinking that visibility meant being demanding or selfish. But it turns out it just means being honest about who you are and what you need. And what do you need now? The question made her smile. I need to keep writing. I need to keep helping other women find their voices. I need to keep learning who I am when I'm not trying to please everyone else. She paused. And I need to keep figuring out what it means to be loved for who I actually am, not for what I can do for someone. Jerome took her hand. I think we're both figuring that out. As Marissa drove home that night, she reflected on how much had changed. Her apartment felt different now, not like a place she was hiding, but like a foundation she was building from. Her phone was full of messages from women who'd attended the reading, sharing their own stories of becoming visible. But the message that meant the most was from Dr. Williams. Watched your interview on the morning show. You've come so far from the woman who first walked into my office wondering if she was having a breakdown. You're not breaking down anymore, you're breaking through. At home, Marissa opened her laptop to work on her next book proposal. Patricia had been fielding calls from publishers interested in a follow-up, and Marissa had been thinking about what story she wanted to tell next. The cursor blinked on a blank page titled Visible, a guide to reclaiming your life. She began to type. This book is for the woman who recognizes herself in the mirror but can't remember the last time anyone else really saw her. For the woman who gives and gives until there's nothing left, then wonders why she feels empty. For the woman who's ready to stop apologizing for taking up space in her own life. If you picked up this book, chances are you're tired of being invisible. You're tired of being the supporting character in everyone else's story. You're ready to step into the spotlight of your own life, even if it makes other people uncomfortable. This is your guide to that transformation. Not just the theory of change, but the practical, day-by-day work of becoming visible to yourself and insisting that others see you too. 1 year after the book launch, Marissa sat in her lawyer's office reviewing the final divorce decree. The legal battle had taken longer than expected, but the results were worth the wait. The judge ruled completely in your favor, Lisa said, sliding the papers across the desk. Robert gets no portion of your book royalties, and he's required to pay substantial alimony for the next 5 years. 5 years. The judge was particularly influenced by your financial records showing how much you'd contributed to support his business ventures and family members over the years. She called it financial recovery for services rendered without compensation. Marissa looked at the numbers. The alimony payments would ensure her financial security while she established her writing and speaking career. More importantly, they represented official recognition that her contributions to the marriage had value. There's more, Lisa continued. The judge also issued a restraining order preventing Robert from interfering with your book promotion or career activities. Apparently, his lawyer's attempts to silence you didn't sit well with her. What about the girls' custody arrangement? They're 18 now, so it's their choice. But they've both indicated they want to live with you during college breaks. As Marissa left the law office, she felt a profound sense of closure. The legal system had validated what she'd known all along. Her contributions had mattered, her voice deserved protection, and her story belonged to her. Her phone rang as she reached her car. It was Elena from her writing group. Marissa, have you seen the news about Delilah's business? No, what happened? Check the local business journal's website. There's an article about businesses struggling after public scandals. Marissa pulled up the article on her phone. The headline read, Local catering company faces boycotts after owner's family controversy. The article detailed how Delilah's catering business had lost several major contracts after Invisible Woman became a bestseller. Apparently, clients had recognized Delilah from the book and didn't want to hire someone who'd publicly undermined her sister's important moment. I feel bad for her, Marissa told Elena. That wasn't my intention. Maybe not, but actions have consequences. She chose to sabotage your graduation and lie to your family. The fact that people don't want to hire someone who behaves that way isn't your fault. After hanging up, Marissa sat in her car for a moment, processing the news. She did feel sorry for Delilah, but she also recognized that her sister was experiencing the natural results of her choices. For years, Delilah had manipulated situations without facing consequences because Marissa had always protected her. That protection was over. Her next call was from Patricia with exciting news about the book's continued success. We've sold foreign rights to 12 countries, Patricia said. And Netflix is interested in optioning it for a limited series. Netflix. They see it as a story that will resonate with women globally. The themes of emotional invisibility and reclaiming your identity are apparently universal. That evening, Marissa met with her clients at the Women's Center. Brenda, her first client, had made remarkable progress over the past year. I've been painting again, Brenda said, her face glowing with pride. I even sold 2 pieces at the local art fair last month. That's wonderful. How did it feel? Scary and amazing. I kept waiting for someone to tell me I was being selfish or impractical. But you know what? No one did. And even if they had, I wouldn't have stopped. What changed? I stopped asking permission to exist, Brenda said simply. I realized that waiting for someone else to validate my worth was like waiting for someone else to breathe for me. It was never going to happen. After the group session, Marissa drove to Jerome's house for dinner. Their relationship had deepened over the past year, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's inner lives. How was court today? He asked as she settled into his kitchen chair. Victorious. The judge ruled that my voice belongs to me, and no one gets to silence it for their convenience. Jerome smiled as he stirred the pasta sauce. I'm proud of you. Not just for winning, but for fighting in the first place. Some days I can't believe I'm the same person who used to apologize for having opinions. You're not the same person. You've grown into who you were always supposed to be. As they ate dinner, Jerome told her about his own growth over the past year. He'd started therapy to understand his role in his first marriage's failure and was learning to be a more present partner. My ex-wife called last week, he said. She thanked me for recommending your book to her. She said it helped her understand what went wrong between us. Is that weird for you? At first. But then I realized it was healing. We both needed to understand how we'd stopped seeing each other as whole people. Jerome reached across the table to take her hand. I never want to make that mistake again. Later that night, Marissa sat at her computer working on her second book when her phone buzzed with a message from Sierra. Mom, I wanted you to know that I broke up with Tyler. I realized I was doing the same thing you did, making myself smaller to make him comfortable. Your book taught me that I deserve better. Marissa smiled and typed back, "You do deserve better. And I'm proud of you for recognizing that pattern before you lost yourself in it." The response came quickly, "I learned from the best. Love you, Mom." As Marissa prepared for bed, she reflected on the past year's journey. The legal victory felt good, but the real triumph was deeper than that. She'd reclaimed not just her voice, but her entire sense of self. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from Delilah, who'd been trying to reach her since the business article came out. Marissa deleted the notifications without listening to the voicemails. Some relationships couldn't be repaired, and that was okay. Instead, she opened her laptop one more time and wrote in her journal, "Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about protection. Today, the legal system protected my right to tell my truth. But the real justice happened months ago when I finally protected my right to exist fully in my own life." The woman who sat alone at her graduation ceremony thought she was ending something. She didn't realize she was beginning everything. Outside her window, the city hummed with life and possibility. Somewhere out there, other invisible women were reading her book, recognizing themselves in her story, and finding the courage to step into their own light. Tomorrow, Marissa would continue helping them do exactly that. 2 years after her graduation ceremony, Marissa stood at the podium of a packed convention center, looking out at over 1,000 women attending the first annual Visible Women Conference. What had started as a book had grown into a movement. "When I wrote about being invisible in my own life, I thought I was telling just my story," she began, her voice carrying easily through the microphone. "But your responses taught me something incredible. My story was our story. Millions of women were living invisible lives, supporting everyone else's dreams while forgetting they had their own." The audience erupted in applause, women of all ages on their feet, recognition and hope shining in their faces. Today we're here to celebrate something revolutionary, the radical act of taking up space in your own life. Of refusing to apologize for having needs, dreams, and voices that matter. Behind her on the large screen, statistics flashed. Domestic violence shelter visits had increased by 30% since Invisible Woman was published, as women began recognizing emotional neglect as a form of abuse. Divorce rates among women over 35 had risen significantly, but so had reports of life satisfaction and mental health improvements. "Change is never easy," Marissa continued. "Some of you have lost relationships in the process of becoming visible. Some have faced financial challenges. Some have been called selfish for the first time in your lives, and it felt terrible until you realized that caring for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary." She paused, looking out at faces she recognized from book signings, women who'd traveled across the country to be here. "But look around you. You're not alone anymore. You're part of a community of women who refuse to disappear, who insist on being seen, who've learned that love without visibility isn't love at all." After her keynote, Marissa participated in panel discussions on rebuilding identity after emotional erasure and financial recovery from invisible labor. The conversations were rich and complex, women sharing strategies for reclaiming their lives and supporting each other through the process. During a break, she checked her phone to find a text from Jerome, watching the live stream from the hospital. "You're amazing. Can't wait to celebrate with you tonight." Jerome had been in a minor car accident the day before, nothing serious, but enough to require overnight observation. The old Marissa would have canceled the conference to be by his side. The new Marissa had visited him, made sure he was okay, then proceeded with her commitment while staying in touch. It was a small but significant difference. "Marissa?" A voice behind her made her turn. It was Dr. Williams, her former therapist, now a friend and professional colleague. "Sarah, I'm so glad you could make it. I wouldn't miss it. I've been watching your journey with such pride." Dr. Williams smiled. "Do you remember what you said in our first session? That you thought you were waking up for the first time in 15 years? I do. You weren't just waking up. You were being reborn. And now you're helping other women through the same process." That afternoon, Marissa led a workshop for mothers and daughters. Sierra and Amber sat in the front row, now 20 years old and in college. They'd become advocates for the Visible Women movement, sharing their own stories about learning to see their mother as a full person. "The relationship between mothers and daughters is complex," Marissa said to the group. "Daughters often absorb their mother's patterns of self-erasure without realizing it. But when mothers become visible, daughters learn that they can be visible too." A woman in her 50s raised her hand. "What if your adult daughter is angry about the changes you've made? My daughter says I'm being selfish for getting divorced after 30 years. That's a common response," Marissa replied. Change threatens people who benefited from your invisibility. Your daughter is grieving the loss of the mother who existed primarily to serve others. Give her time to adjust to the mother who exists for herself too. Sierra spoke up from the audience. I was angry at first when my mom changed. I thought she was abandoning our family. But I realized I was angry because I'd never learned to see her as a real person with her own feelings and needs. Learning to see her clearly made me a better person and a better daughter. After the workshop, Marissa walked with her daughters through the exhibit hall, where vendors sold everything from art supplies to financial planning services to, nevertheless, she persisted, t-shirts. Mom, Amber said as they paused at a booth selling business planning resources for women, I want to ask you something and I want you to be honest. Of course. Do you ever regret it? Breaking up our family, dealing with all the backlash, having to rebuild everything? Marissa considered the question carefully. I regret that it took me so long to value myself. I regret that I modeled invisibility for you both for so many years. But do I regret becoming visible? Never. Even though it was hard? Especially because it was hard. Easy things rarely change your life. Hard things do. That evening, the conference concluded with a ceremony recognizing women who'd made significant life changes after reading Invisible Woman. The stories were incredible. Women who'd gone back to school, started businesses, left toxic relationships, moved across the country, pursued artistic dreams they'd abandoned decades earlier. One woman, a grandmother of 7, had earned her pilot's license at age 62. Another had opened a nonprofit supporting women in similar transitions. A teacher had quit her job to become a travel writer. A doctor had started painting again after 20 years. These women didn't just become visible, Marissa said as she presented the recognition awards. They became luminous. They're lighting the way for other women to find their own paths to visibility. After the ceremony, Marissa stood in the lobby saying goodbye to attendees. Many pressed notes into her hands, sharing their own stories and thanking her for her courage. You saved my life, one woman whispered. I didn't realize I was drowning until I read your book. You saved your own life, Marissa replied. I just held up a mirror. The last person to approach was an unexpected face. Robert's mother, Janet, who'd written one of the character statements against her during the divorce. Marissa, Janet said nervously. I owe you an apology. Mrs. Johnson, you don't need to. Yes, I do. I was wrong about you. I thought you were being vindictive and selfish. But I read your book and I started thinking about my own marriage, my own life. Janet's eyes filled with tears. I disappeared too. 70 years old, and I just realized I've been invisible for most of my adult life. Marissa felt a wave of compassion for this woman who'd spent decades criticizing her for the very changes she now wished she'd made herself. It's never too late to become visible, Marissa said gently. Robert misses you terribly. He knows he lost the best thing in his life. I hope he finds happiness. And I hope he learns to see his next partner clearly from the beginning. Do you think there's any chance? No, Marissa said kindly but firmly. But there's a chance for both of us to have healthier relationships in the future because we learn from our mistakes. Janet nodded sadly and walked away. Later that night, Marissa sat in her hotel room with Jerome, who'd been released from the hospital and driven 3 hours to surprise her at the conference. How do you feel? He asked as they shared takeout Chinese food. Grateful. Overwhelmed. Hopeful. Marissa set down her chopsticks. 2 years ago, I thought my story was ending. I thought missing my graduation was the final proof that I didn't matter. But it turns out it was just the beginning. The beginning of what? Of everything. Of mattering to myself. Of helping other women matter to themselves. Of loving and being loved as a complete person instead of a convenient function. Jerome reached for her hand. Speaking of that, I have something I want to ask you. Marissa felt her heart skip. Jerome. I know you're not the same person who got married 20 years ago believing that love meant disappearing. And I'm not the same person who let his first wife fade into the background. He pulled a small box from his pocket. But I think we're both ready to try again with everything we've learned. Inside the box was a simple ring, beautiful but not flashy. I'm not asking you to marry me right away, Jerome continued. I'm asking if you'll consider building a life with someone who sees you completely and loves what he sees. Marissa looked at this man who'd supported her journey without trying to control it, who'd cheered her victories without taking credit for them, who'd learned to love her visibility instead of fearing it. Yes, she said simply. But I need you to understand something. The woman you're proposing to will never again make herself smaller for someone else's comfort. She'll never again sacrifice her dreams for someone else's convenience. She's visible now and she's staying that way. Jerome smiled. That's exactly the woman I want to marry. As Marissa slipped the ring onto her finger, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. It had started with an empty auditorium and a profound sense of loss. But it had led to a full life, meaningful work, authentic relationships, and a love that enhanced rather than erased her. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick message to the Visible Women group chat that had formed among conference organizers. Just got engaged to someone who sees me clearly and loves what he sees. Remember, the right person will never ask you to dim your light. They'll want to stand beside you as you shine. The responses came quickly. Heart emojis, congratulations, and messages of hope from women around the world who were learning to shine too. Outside her hotel window, the city sparkled with a million lights, each one visible against the darkness. Marissa had been invisible for so long that she'd forgotten how beautiful the light could be. But she remembered now. And she would never forget again. The woman who had sat alone at her graduation ceremony, wondering if she mattered, had become a beacon for millions of women finding their way home to themselves. Her voice, once silenced by years of putting others first, now reached around the world. She was no longer invisible. She was luminous. And her light was helping other women find their own way out of the darkness of disappearing in their own lives. The story that began with an empty auditorium ended with a world full of visible women, refusing to apologize for taking up space in their own lives. It was, Marissa thought as she fell asleep beside the man who loved her for exactly who she was, a very good ending. And an even better beginning.